Good morning. Please join me in lighting the chalice. The words are in your order of service. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, the celebration of our life each year together.
Beautiful. Good morning. My name is Charlie Tyler. I'm the pastoral minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. What I'd like to do is draw our attention together through these words, and if I may. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need to the ends that all souls grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other. Thus do we covenant with each other. We bring our hearts here that we might be able to find encouragement with each other, a single-mindedness in that which is most important to us. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge Frank Flamenhoff and the passing of his wife Alyssa this week very suddenly. Frank, our hearts are with you in your journey and your family, and so please take care and know that we stand with you. I also have some other announcements that I want to bring to your attention. This concerns a rare person in our church, a young lady who is expecting a child. Look around and you'll see why it's so rare. The announcement is there will be a baby celebration for Sarah Gasecki after the talk back on April 7th. Mark that down on your calendars. If you can stay, we'll have a cake and let Sarah and Ruben open a few gifts. Then their gift registry is in Amazon, and you can pick up the link to that in the back of the church. So please, if you would, please take care of that rare person among us, and maybe there'll be some more. Jan, if you would please, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Good morning. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes? Okay. So Jan and John show this morning. Very briefly, I would encourage everybody...
There's a reason for this.
I know that. It's just, I have a loud voice anyway. Sorry. We're just trying to encourage anybody to please join us next Saturday evening on the 23rd for, excuse me, for a very fun and enjoyable evening of good food, good company, good entertainment by some of our very talented local members, and a special appearance from Commander Pat Jobe, who will be coming in from Starfleet headquarters, which is now located in North Carolina. And here's John.
Thanks, Jan. One thing I need to stress for this gala event on Saturday, please, it's here for you to share. And there's a lot of people here that don't know each other. And this is a really great opportunity just to get to know each other. And so that's my plug.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jan. This past Friday night, we had a fabulous group of people here today. The two guys that put the music on Malphurs. I don't exactly remember their title, but Bob and Dick were extraordinarily talented people. Those of you that missed it will want to come again when they come back around. My goodness, those were some amazing musicians that were in front of us. Sounds that I've never heard before come out of a guitar that really wasn't a guitar, and it was particularly meaningful. So I want to take your attention now to Friday, April 19th. Jacob Johnson will be with us on Music on Malphurs, and we look forward to being together for that. Also, you see our March theme of Transformation Sunday. Dr. Jones will be speaking, and then on Sunday the 31st, Clint Tawes will be sharing a time with us. And you'll see an announcement there concerning Kathy Quirk and her services. Please take the time to read through that. That's been a meaningful and difficult loss for this community, for this congregation, and I know that you will want to be a part of that if possible for you to do so. Catching up with myself. I think that's all the announcements I need to make. Is there something that's been missed? I'm going to come to the visitors. Thank you. I'm going to come to visitors. So while I'm here, let's do that. Those of you that are first or second time guests or visitors today, we'd love to know who you are. Hey, Sarah, I just saw you back there. That's our person who is going to be having a child. Absolutely. So if you're a first-time guest or visitor and you're sitting on my right, the left side of the sanctuary, if you would like to stand and introduce yourself, we would appreciate that. Tell us where you're from. In the middle section, first, second-time guests that would like to introduce yourself. And on my far left, your right, any first or second-time guests or visitors. Those of you that have come here, you know that you come here because of the love and compassion, for the open-heartedness and the open-armedness of this congregation that welcomes you and offers you that support in the life and in the world in which we are living. So welcome. Makes this place your home. Dick Hood, opening words, please.
Good morning. Welcome. I've always been in this, well, I feel like I'm a pretty straight guy, but I've always had a little bit of rebellion. And it always seems to take place around St. Patrick's Day. I grew up in a community that had a very, very large Irish population. And if you didn't wear green on St. Patrick's Day, you were kind of looked at a little funny. But that's okay, because I want to be a little bit out of the box. On the other hand, I also want to be sympathetic to those, any of you, who might be offended that I am not wearing any green. So, I'm only wearing it for one announcement that I have to make.
Oh, you look so cute.
I'll get you for that. We like to be a community that is diverse, that lives in a variety of places, but I need to address those of you who live in Sun City. Those of you who live in Sun City know that we get this newspaper every Wednesday for free. Well, that's about what it's worth, which is not much. And usually I don't even bother opening it. But Molly happened to be reading it at the breakfast table one morning and said, "You got to read this article." I said, dumb newspaper, I don't know. But I read it, and I can only say that I really recommend it to you. So, for those of you who live in Sun City, would you please go through your recycle bin, find that freebie newspaper that you get every Wednesday, and read this article about one man's journey from Orthodox religion to liberal religion. And it's entitled, "Missing Potlucks and Singing, but Not Theology." And when I read it, I thought, really, it could have been the Odyssey of someone we all know and love. So I only have one copy, and I'm giving it to that person. There, that's there for the damage. On a more serious note, our opening words this morning are really a benediction from our hymnal. They are allegedly the words of John Murray. And hopefully that name is now a little bit familiar to you, because I preached a couple of times about John Murray, who is really the father of universalism in America. He preached the first universalist sermon it wasn't America, it was in the United States. It wasn't the United States yet, pardon me. He preached the first universalist sermon in America even before we had the United States. And I'm going to reference this reading later, so I really ask, unlike sometimes opening words, but just pay attention, it's very brief. He wrote this to his congregants, but I think he also had ministers, of his fellow ministers in mind. He said, "Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your new vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God." Words from over 250 years ago, which still for me today strike a chord, at least for me. If you would join us in our opening hymn, Rise as You Are Willing and Able, we will sing verses 1 and 4 of hymn number 354.
Back in the 1970s, when a small group of people started getting interested in establishing a liberal fellowship on Hilton Head. They started meeting in various people's homes, and the more they met, the more organized they got. And in 1977, they became chartered as the Unitarian Fellowship of Hilton Head Island. 18 people signed the membership book, and that was our beginning. For 4 years, the ministry was provided by lay leaders and a variety of speakers. And then in 1981, Reverend Manuel Holland was hired part-time as our very first minister. This morning, Reverend Dick Hood will be preaching about ministry, past, present, and future. And he thought it might be helpful, especially for newer members, if I talked a little bit about the ministers who have served this congregation. So Manuel Holland was the first. He was the minister for 10 years, the whole time part-time, as he also worked full-time in his own insurance business. Manuel worked tirelessly, and he may have been the most humble person that I've ever known. He devoted his life to helping others, and he was dearly loved by all who knew him, and we have pictures of him and his wife Olive, painted by Jana Stiles, hanging on the wall in the back of this room. Manuel Holland became our minister emeritus in 1987. And the following year, in 88, we hired our second minister, Reverend Frank Anderson, also part-time, because he was half-time with us, and he was also half-time with the UU Church in Savannah. Frank Anderson was a man of many talents. His sermons were spellbinding, and he was a sensitive and caring counselor. He was also a talented poet, and he would weave his poetry into his sermons. And just the other night, having dinner with some friends, I found out that Frank Anderson actually had 13 cats. Never knew that. Anyway, after 12 years of meeting in a bunch of different places, with Frank Anderson as our minister and Manuel Holland as our minister emeritus, in 1991, the Unitarian Fellowship of Hilton Head signed a contract with Congregation Beth Yam to use their facility as our meeting place. They didn't use their building on Sundays, so it was open for us, and our relationship with the temple lasted for 16 years. I came along in 97, and I was hired as the Director of Religious Education, and together, under Frank Anderson's leadership, we grew this church to about 100 members. Frank was great, and he had many gifts, but administrative work was not one of them. And he would say that himself. So in 2001, to supplement Frank Anderson, we hired Reverend Nan White, and she became our third minister, part-time as well. She was to provide administrative help, assume some pastoral duties, and preach at least one service a month. Nan was a dream. She was funny, she could sing, and she was a joy to work with in every way. Life was good back then. It was a time in the fellowship where we were coasting along, relatively content and carefree. And then suddenly and sadly, in 2003, Reverend Frank Anderson died. And this was the beginning of probably our greatest transformation. His death made us pause and really take a look at ourselves. As we struggled to determine how we would move forward, it was Reverend Nan White who helped guide us in the making of a couple big decisions. One was to buy this piece of land in Bluffton and to build this building that you are sitting in today. And the other was for us to begin looking for a full-time minister. We were outgrowing our space in the Sunday school, and Nan, not wanting full-time, had accepted the part-time position as minister of the UU Fellowship in Beaufort. So Reverend Nan White moved on, and although it took us a few years, in 2006, we hired our fourth minister, our first full-time minister, a brand new UU minister from Southern California, Reverend Tom Schmidt. And then, the following year, on March 17th in 2007, which was exactly 17 years ago from today, we had a grand celebration right here to dedicate this, our new building, that we had built on this piece of land that we had bought. We cut through a huge red ribbon that was around the front doors, and we all came in singing, "Enter, Rejoice, and Come In." Anthony Serpi, who now heads up our kitchen crew, was then the co-president of the board, and we moved into this new building and officially changed our name to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. We were riding high. But as our enthusiasm began to settle down a bit, we eventually came to realize that we had overextended ourselves, and we were unable to sustain the financial burden of both the new facility and the full-time minister. So Reverend Tom Schmidt's position was cut back to part-time, which resulted in his resignation in 2011. And when this happened, Reverend Manuel Holland stepped up and assumed the role of minister again, this time quarter-time, which gave us the chance to get our finances under better control. And for about 5 years, we went back to having a variety of speakers, with Manuel Holland being the glue that kept us all together. And while Manuel was still alive, in his honor, we dedicated this room to him, and we named this space the Holland Sanctuary. He died in August of 2022, and that was the past, which brings us to the present, which began somewhere back in, I think, late 2015 or maybe early 2016, when on some random Sunday, when this guy named Charlie Tyler walked through our doors. He came to just check us out, quietly sat in the back, and then we got all excited when we learned that he was a minister. And Charlie preached his first sermon to us on September 11th of 2016. His sermon was called A Prophet to Our Own Souls. And that day, he had us all look at ourselves as if we were a poem or a song or a sonnet, and he suggested that we allow ourselves the wonder of using the poetry written by our lives to become prophets to our own souls. And that was it. We kept asking him to preach, and he kept saying yes. And in the fall of 2019, we hired him as our pastoral minister. Part-time, of course, because like all of our other ministers, he too had a full-time job, which he still does, as the chaplain for Hospice of the Low Country. Charlie Tyler is our North Star. His bright light quietly provides us with direction, and he helps us stay on course. Under his leadership, our congregation now has over 150 members, of which he is one. He signed the membership book on Valentine's Day in 2020. So in the 47 years of our existence, from 1977 until now, we have hired 5 ministers. Manuel Holland, Frank Anderson, Reverend Nan White, Tom Schmidt, and Charlie Tyler. And I could end it there, but we really cannot talk about the ministry of UUCL without mentioning the very special situation that we have created here. And that is that besides Reverend Charlie Tyler, we also have the ministers who are regularly scheduled as guest speakers. Reverend Pat Jobe, Reverend Neil Jones, and the minister who is in the pulpit today, Reverend Dick Hood. We can also now add Reverend Clint Tawes to that list, as he will be speaking to us this year anyway, in all months that have a 5th Sunday. Neat. It's neat. It is neat. The ministry that we have here at UUCL is unique. It's neat, and it is like no other. Our ministers embrace this congregation. They are so engaged with us. Like today, Dick is preaching, Charlie's here, so we know everything is okay, Neil is in the house, and I bet anything that Pat Jobe is watching. And like John and Jan just told us, Pat Jobe is going to be driving down here, 5-hour ride down here and 5-hour ride home next weekend, just so that he can be with us for our pledge drive dinner this coming up Saturday night. How about that? Anyway, that's it. In a nutshell, that is our history. And I don't know what the future ministry is going to look like, but today I would say that it's looking pretty good.
We are nothing if not adaptable. And speaking of sharing, which was a line in the last hymn, we share our abundance with the community. And you'll see a table under the picture of Manuel Holland in the back of the sanctuary, which has some paper bags on it. And that is the place that every week we bring our donations of food for the food pantry, Sandalwood Food Pantry on Hilton Head and Bluffton Self-Help. We contribute to both of those food pantries. And another way we share our treasure with this church. I think this church is part of our treasure, and we continue to sustain the health of our church. And so now we will pass the basket. If you are a first or second time visitor, feel free to let the basket pass. Your presence here is your gift to us. Thank you for your ongoing generosity to this church. And now Tish will lead us in another form of sharing that we do every week.
Good morning. Good morning, Tish. Well, this is the point in our service where I'm being told to move forward. It's short. Okay. There's good and there's bad in our lives. And this is the time when we share what's good and what's bad. The good is enhanced when we share it, and the bad is easier to bear. So we would like you to, if you would choose to come forward and give us your name, take a stone from the basket, tell us your joy or your concern, and then place the basket or place the stone in the carom. We ask that you make no announcements nor political statements during this time. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to speak for the people that cannot be here, mostly because of health reasons. Mary Watson is recovering from open heart surgery, and she says to tell you that she's healing and she's getting her energy back slowly. Kathy Zeiser's husband, Bud, is still with us. The challenge continues to be with pain management. Kathy says that hospice gives them everything they need to help Bud in that way. She says to thank everyone for their love and support. It just means so very much to her. And she's hoping to get to the celebration of life for Kathy Quirk and Alyssa Flamenhoff. You know, my heart is getting heavy every time we lose someone in this congregation. My heart gets heavier. Irene Reed, Marge Lamke, Paul Weiser, Kathy Quirk, and now Alyssa Flamenhoff. I hold these people in my heart, and I'm sure that you do too. And we've lost them just in the last 6 months. So I would say let's grieve together. If we need to talk about it, if we want to hug one another, let's be loving and gentle with one another during this time of loss. Thank you.
I have a joy. Is that good? My oldest son's a professor at Bentley University in Boston. Don't spread the word because I don't think he gave notice yet. But he's accepted a job down at Central Florida University. I don't know much about it except it's outside Disneyland or Disney World, whatever. But I know it's 5 hours away. And it's a fabulous position. He's very excited, as am I. And so that's my joy. I said, you're going to sleep up. He's got a brother here. And he always stays with his brother because they go golfing and blah, blah, blah. I said, this time, at least once in a while, you're going to stay with your mom. I'll feed you and then you can go play golf. So that's my joy.
I have a joy. So I looked at the sermon topic and it just reminded me of this last year where my niece married her new husband. And it was so exciting for our family because the Christmas before that, she had asked me if I would marry her. So I did click, click, click. And it was so wonderful.
Politically correct. First of all, I tried to get up right after Mary spoke because it's ironic. I brought a picture of Alyssa that we just found. She was kind of camera shy. And we did dining in a small group. So we've only met once as far as I know. We haven't done a very good job. But the first time Mary saw Alyssa, she said, "You're beautiful." Well, Alyssa was an old lady by then. But this isn't when she was at her peak. This is when at one of our sons' wedding. But she was beautiful. In fact, when I met her, she was the most beautiful woman I had ever dated. And I dated a model just before her. She looked like Elizabeth Taylor when Elizabeth Taylor looked her best, at least in my mind. So my joy is, oh, by the way, all of our kids, our 3 sons flew in. Well, one drove from Orlando with his whole family. He's got 4 kids. They came. Their husbands, no, I'm jumping the gun. 2 of our granddaughters are engaged. Their fiancés came with them. The family, which I always felt we didn't see each other enough, were all there. I think for Alyssa's funeral, it's going to be on the 30th, the Saturday. Charlie's kind of squeezing us in at this late date, because unfortunately there are a bunch of funerals. I'm not going to be, I'm sort of told husbands don't speak at the funeral. I'd like to tell you how we met, but I'm going to try to write it down and give it to my kids. It's been a magical, in many respects, journey. Oh, one of the lines that they'll probably give you that I thought of is, and those of you who know it's true. Oh, by the way, I want to thank all the people who sent cards. Unfortunately, Alyssa never got to see them, but I did, and I read them, and it was heartwarming to me. What I thought, and I told the kids, is anyone who knew Alyssa liked her, and anyone who knew her well loved her. She was a very bright woman, very different from me. I talked way too much. She listened beautifully, and she really listened. And she knew a lot. So this is my joy. Of course, my concern, you all know. But by the way, she had a great sense of humor. She was in the hospital, in the emergency care. We knew then that the tumor was huge. We hadn't done the biopsy yet, but there was no way they could operate on it. It was right near where the spinal fluid goes to float your brain. And so even if the radiation could reduce it, it was going to be fatal. And chemo could also reduce it. And we were looking forward to a few good months, but it didn't happen. She went suddenly. But she made a little joke, a sad joke, a black joke. She said, we must be having an epidemic of brain cancer. John Quirk died of it about 12 years ago or so, 10, 12 years. And now Kathy, who we knew well, we'd gone to a Seder with her. They weren't Jewish, but a mutual friend was. And she said, so she still had a sense of humor, even though she was in considerable pain from, and it went so fast. We found out, she said something that didn't make sense. I mean, I knew something was wrong. And then I found out that even in the week before, when I had no clue, I'm a kind of clueless guy. I am not very observant. But anyhow, I hope those of you who can make it will come, even if you didn't know her, because you'll find out what you missed a little when her kids talk. All of it, I mean, all three of our sons, many of the grandchildren, we have 7 grandchildren, 5 of them were here to see her go. And by the way, her death, there were some real bad times. They screwed up in the hospital. She was in agony. My son couldn't get through. He's a very knowledgeable doctor, so is his wife. And anyhow, she had something, it was bad for 2 days. But boy, when she got into the intensive care, which they were supposed to put her in there right after a biopsy was done. Oh, by the way, it was cancer. But she would have died from the tumor anyhow. I do have the regret. I gotta say, I don't know if it overwhelms the love. I put it in the wrong one. Yeah, I'm not functioning that well, but I must say, at the time, the regret overwhelms the joy. But boy, having been married to her for almost 63 years. And producing kids. If you've been around a while, the kids are out of college, but you've heard me talk about amazing achievements, Phi Beta Kappa, Rhodes Scholarships, stuff like that. Anyhow, I was a lucky man.
It's always scary to get up here and speak, but I have two joys. My son and his wife will be moving down to Sun City in the end of June, which is very exciting for me. What's even more exciting, I think, is he's moving 4 houses away from me. The other joy I have is that on Thursday, my granddaughter gave birth to my 6th great-grandchild, Miles Henry Campbell, 7 pounds, 12 ounces, and 21 inches long. And my granddaughter has said, this is the end of it.
I have 2 stones for the joys and concerns that remain in our hearts. And by the way, I loved Alyssa. She played mahjong with us and tennis, and she's just a remarkable woman. So, if you would turn to number 698, right? Yes. And your affirmation in the back of the book. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone.
I'd like for you to place a picture in your mind, which you should be able to do. The picture is this pulpit, but the picture doesn't have a person in it. The pulpit is empty, and it's time for the sermon, and nobody's here to give it. How would you feel? Certainly, I think you would feel, as I would, uncertain. Well, wait a minute. What's going on? Our expectations aren't being met. I would also certainly feel uncomfortable that somehow things aren't going the way I'm used to they're going. And I'd like you to take those emotions and bottle them up a little bit, and I'll come back to them later in my prepared talk. The topic for the month is transformation, and I want to talk about the transformation that I have seen in my career in the ministry, and the transformation of the ministry, specifically in our Unitarian Universalist faith, but it really is, this transformation is taking place, I believe, in all clergies, regardless of denomination. We have in history always, it seems, set aside certain people to be ministers, clergy, I'll use that word in its place. We grant them special status and special privileges, but we also expect that they're going to perform certain functions. In many theologies, we believe that somehow they have a special relationship with God. I don't purport that here in this church, but it's true if you look back in history. Think about those people who were prophets and ministers at the time, Moses and all the other prophets of the Old Testament, the Delphic oracle priests and priestesses, the Vestal virgins in Roman religion, the rabbis in ancient and current Judaism, and certainly within Christianity, the ministers, the bishops, the cardinals, and even the Pope. I also do not claim to be infallible, although some days I wish I were, but that's not the case. All of us, supposedly, as part of being in the clergy, had a call of some sort of an experience. I have a neighbor who talked to me one time about his call to the ministry. I didn't have a call. Nobody beamed me up, I'm afraid. So why would I, back in 1968, make the decision, and actually I've made it before then, to go into the ministry? No call, or what is it, Ken Nugent? One call, that's all. I didn't even get one call. And I've reflected on that for quite a while, and I think I've come up with at least an alternate theory, that in my growing up, ministers were important. And again, I would go back to my grandmother, and the minister that I had in my church growing up was a real role model for me. And I was fortunate when I got to high school to be part of a larger youth group, Unitarian Universalist youth group, Kathy and I, called Liberal Religious Youth, that allowed me to see a number of other ministers as well. And here, I want to step aside just a minute, besides a little tiny bit off topic, but not much. I was privileged to know Manuel Holland, and I was privileged to know him twice. At the very beginning of his ministry, he was the advisor in part of my LRY activities in high school. We used to call him Dutch. I'm not sure he ever knew the name, but that's what we called him anyway. And then I knew him at the very end of his ministry. And I gotta tell you, I have not met anyone greater in the category of compassion, caring, and conscience. How do you like that? 3 C's, and I've even got another one coming. I would sum up Manuel Holland, there's his picture back there, as a man of class. And if you, unfortunately, if you were not here, as many of you now sitting here, and that you never met him, you really missed something very, very special. And I think that in a little way, I don't want to say Manuel Holland called me to the ministry. He didn't. But now that I think about it, it was people like Manuel. And that really set the example for me to make the decision to go into the ministry. And in those days, while it was tough, by comparison, it was easy to what happens today. To become a full-fledged minister, Unitarian Universalist minister, you had to have a bachelor's degree, then you had to have seminary, which was either 3 years or 4 years, 3 in my situation, and then you had to get ordained. And along with that, you had to get fellowshipped. And let me tell you, fellowshipped was sending to the denomination back then, just sending to the denomination some references, and then preparing a sermon and going in front of this group of maybe 15 or 20 people all sitting around a big oval table and they'd call you in, and you had to preach a sermon, and then you had to defend it. And at the end, you went out, and somebody came out and said, okay, you were either a 1, 2, or a 3. 1 was, go ahead, yeah, great, be a minister. 2 was, you're good, but come back. And 3 was, forget it. There weren't too many 3s at the time. But you also had to get ordained. And in my situation, I was ordained not in a Unitarian Universalist church. I was ordained in a United Church of Christ. And if you want to know why, you're going to have to come to Talk Back and ask me how that happened to happen in my life. But that was about it. I received some benefits from joining the clergy. Back then, I think there was some sort of special status. People treated you maybe a little bit differently, or maybe a lot differently if they thought you were a man of God. I never claimed that, but there was a certain status attached. You could also get reduced airfare on airlines. You laugh, but it was true. Back then they had clergy fares. Oh, those were the days, my friend. Also, you got a reduction on your property tax. Ooh, in New York, anyway. Talk about separation of church and state. I believe in separation of church and state unless it helps me pay my property tax. But there was another benefit, and it's one that people don't talk about a lot, but in my cohort, I didn't have to go to Vietnam. Ooh. I sailed through with my 2S draft certification through college, and then blithely went to my 4D student deferment, and then made darn sure that right after I graduated, I got ordained so I could put Reverend in my name, and then I got 4D and I sailed along. That didn't happen to a lot of other people that were my cohorts in high school and even in college. That was ministry back, I was ordained 53 years ago, and actually I now realize that I was at least in part a minister even during my internship in seminary, so that I've really been preaching 56 years. Oh my goodness. It's amazing I have anything original to say ever. You know, I feel like sometimes I've said it all. Things have changed. The ministry has in some ways, in my judgment, been transformed. And not necessarily for the better. That large group of which I was a part, there were 50 people in my graduating class at this little Baptist seminary in Rochester, New York. There were a whole bunch of us. A few of them were draft dodgers. No question about that. But not a lot. Most people genuinely believed. And when we got out of ministry, many of us, I did not, but many of us went into the parish ministry, accepted being in a very small church, getting paid sometimes with a dozen eggs or a sack of potatoes if you were in a rural church. But there were actually more ministers back then than there were jobs. That's changed, and that's part of the transformation. Let me tell you about the situation in the ministry now and why we should be concerned about it. There's a shortage of ministers. Even though, although many of those small churches have closed or now don't employ full-time ministers, but employ part-time ministers and ministers who have another occupation. And in some ways, that's part of my history. I served a church for 35 years, going there 2 or 3 Sundays a month. But I had a full-time job, and that's how I put meat and potatoes on the, or if you're vegan, which I'm not, but food, I better just say food, on the table. That's changed. Now, there's a shortage of ministers. My cohort group is pretty much all retired and gone. The status of ministry has changed. No more airline fares. Nobody asks me, even when you make your reservation. I just did to go to Maine, and United Airlines asks you the beginning title, and you I click on that menu, ready to put in Reverend. It wasn't even there. Things have changed. And I know Ellen's not going to be happy, but I am dead set against this idea of being able to go on the internet. It's the only profession I know of. You can go on the internet, pay $39, click on it, and you can use the term reverend, and you have all the privileges, supposedly, of being a minister, including performing weddings. God help us if we get doctors who can pay $39 and be a physician and prescribe opiates. No other profession has suffered such a demeaning time, a demeaning transformation as had ministry. Why does that matter to us? It matters to us, and I say us because I'm a member here, so I'm kind of in this unusual situation, minister, but I also sit out there in the congregation. And I got to tell you that it's wonderful that we have this 4-minister rotation. I think when I first started, I heard some grumbling, well, we'll do that till we get a full-time minister, like this is only a temporary situation here. Well, we don't want to do this, we need a full-time person. I don't hear that anymore. Not at all. And part of that is because of talent. So many of the roles, even though at his age, he's still got a full-time job. When we, as part of our group of 4, who are all eligible for Social Security, by the way, and in fact, I'll give you a little secret, 3 of the 4 of us are 70 or over. We, as a congregation, are vulnerable. Times change, health changes, personal preference changes, people move, people get tired. God forbid people die. But what we have right now is not going to be what we have in the future. Because if you think there's a whole bunch of other Unitarian Universalist ministers out there in the Low Country waiting to come to be part of our wonderful congregation, well, that's a bunch of bunk. I'd use another term, but I was brought up, you didn't use that term from the pulpit. So, we are vulnerable. But having said that, even though I hope you felt uncertain and uncomfortable about an empty pulpit, I think that there's a reason for hope. And that we have to begin to think as a group about what happens when this group of 4 somehow gets dented or obliterated or whatever. And I think if we look upon it as rather not just a tragedy, but as an opportunity, we might be able to re-transform ourselves again and remain as what we are, a vibrant, growing, and competent congregation. And let me give you some practical hints about what I think we might be doing. We need to continue to use outside speakers. Cheryl does a wonderful job And I'm not trying to brown you up, you know, but I don't want any more time. No. But of bringing other people in, other perspectives. We need to be doing as much, if not more, of that. But we also need to be tapping even more people in the congregation to come and give us 20-minute thought. Remember that, 20 minutes, no more. People don't like it if we go over 20 minutes. Okay? I just want to warn you, if you think you can come up and preach, that's okay, as long as you don't call yourself a minister, but you get 20 minutes and that's it. But we have a reservoir of talent that we need to start involving even more. And I notice in July that Ashley's going to be preaching. I will be watching on Zoom for sure. But you get 20 minutes. Secondly, as much as our care team does a wonderful job, and they do, God bless you, that's it. We need to be thinking about a core of people who have become trained to do, to some degree, what Charlie does, as backup to Charlie. And that requires not just good intentions, but some active training. By the way, the book that he mentioned last week, by David Brooks, what was the title? How to Know?
How to Know and How to Be Known.
How to Know and Be Known. Highly recommended. But we need more. We need a group of people who can back him up when he's not available, or when he decides maybe he's just going to hang up his boots. You know, the man is, no offense, Charlie, but I'm older than you are, but you still got 2 jobs. How long is that going to go on? We need to take this time to get a group together that can provide skilled pastoral support. We can do a better job with support groups. Certainly, we have that list, Betsy, that you made. How about a support group for people who have recently lost a spouse? We probably do that informally, but that needs to be formalized. That helps us come together and coalesce and concentrate on people's needs. And as far as needs go, we also need to continue and expand adult education. Maybe we shouldn't call it education, but maybe we should call it something else. But to allow people to come together and examine and talk about spiritual issues and perhaps even our Unitarian Universalist faith. We should be a little bit uncomfortable when we come on Sunday and we know this isn't going to last forever. And as we as a group, and Anne did a wonderful job, as a group has transformed itself, once we may need to be thinking about transforming ourselves once again. And what that means exactly, I don't know. But we can start to think finally about worship without a minister. The budget committee's not here. I know, I see the chairperson of the finance committee in the back, so you can't listen to this. But we could have, on occasion, worship without a minister. I would love to come on a Sunday morning and have some readings and then listen to John play. And then have John tell us why he chose a particular piece and what it might mean. I think that would be a wonderful worship service. Wonderful. There are lots of other opportunities as well. But I leave you, like John Murray said, with a message of hope, that we may have only a small light, but we need to let it shine. We need to give them a reason to be healthy, a reason to be compassionate, and finally, most of all, what John Murray said, we need to continue to give them not hell, but hope. Instead of a final hymn this morning, we're going to have a responsive reading, number 569. You would look in the back of your hymnal. I chose this because Olympia Brown was the first woman ordained in the United States to be recognized by a national denomination. First, we call her the first real woman minister, and she was a Universalist. You may read what's in italics. Stand by this faith. Work for it and sacrifice for it.
There is nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which is placed before us the loftiest ideals.
Which has confronted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful.
Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great victory.
That you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without counting the cost.
Go on finding different applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God, whichever lives and loves.
Amen.
Dick, thank you so much for that far-reaching and future-reaching message that you have brought. And just so you know, I've already texted that picture to David and Sarah. It will be public domain in the next few moments. Thank you, Dick. For those of you that are visiting here, thank you for being a part of this. Those of you that are members, I thank you for your support. And for the way that we continue to come together as a community and share our hearts and share our emotions. For those of you that are part of this service, for David and for John and for Anne and the message that she brought, and those whose names I should be calling and forgetting. But I do want to thank you for the teamwork that we have and the way that we bring this together. It's an honor and a privilege and a joy to be a part of this congregation. If you would please take your hymnals into your hands, and Dick Hood is going to lead us in the closing message 692.
We will be having talk back, but I also guarantee that if you come to talk back, we will be done. We will hold to our tradition of noontime. Our closing words again are going to be in unison, number 692. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another, that they may become true. If you have known love, Give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace.
As your worship chair, Dick's message is terrifying to me. Will you join me, please, in extinguishing the chalice? We will all stand together. The words are in your order of service. While we extinguish the flame, we shall carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment, until we are together again.
Check, 1, 2, check, check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Thank you.